more details on the new salary criteria for EP holders, and for the first time, they target financial services. Is this good or bad news for businesses?
With less traffic and new travel patterns, COVID-19 is changing the way we commute and improving sustainability.
And playing to a global audience, these little critters go viral on social media.
Good evening, it's Thursday. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman.
And I'm Olivia Quay. You can, of course, subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Singapore is tightening its work pass requirements for foreigners who want to work in the country. From September 1st, the minimum qualifying salary for employment pass holders will be raised to $4,500 from the current $3,900.
And for the first time, the Manpower Ministry is setting higher qualifying salaries for a specific sector. From December 1st, the new salary criteria for EPs in the financial services sector will be further raised to $5,000 for new applicants. The Monetary Authority of Singapore says it supports the move by MOM as the sector continues to create jobs even during the crisis.
For S-Pass holders, the minimum qualifying salary will be raised from $2,500 from the current $2,400. The new requirement applies from October 1st. There will be no further changes to levies and quotas in this round of updates.
We're pleased to welcome Mr. Ho Meng Kit, Chief Executive of the Singapore Business Federation. Now, Mr. Ho, now that we have more details to the initial announcement yesterday, will these impending changes serve more of a help or a hindrance to businesses, you think?
I would think generally this is not good news for businesses. Though for businesses that are currently not hiring either employment pass holders or S-Pass holders, it will not affect them. And I think most sectors are not hiring. But in the renewal of the existing S-Pass holders, I think this will affect them. And in the situation whereby the companies cannot pass on increased costs to the consumers, so it would mean that there would be increased business costs for those businesses as well. So I think it's generally not so good news, but I can recognize that it is important for government to do this now because the economy is slowing. We are in a recession, and there are many PMETs, locals, which will eventually not be employed. So this clearly is to switch employment, particularly for PMETs, to the local sector. I think it will have that effect of enhancing it. But I caution that we should not go too far. You know, this call to develop a Singapore core, certainly companies should do that, but we should also recognize that it is important for Singapore to have its fair share of foreign manpower because they create jobs. And we really don't want to go enjoy every other country which is becoming more nativist, you know. Then Singapore, there's no difference in Singapore. We're joining all other countries, whether it is Hong Kong or developed economies. I think we punch above our weight. We are differentiated. We can be competitive because, you know, we are a hub. We welcome foreigners. We welcome ideas. And I think we need to improve this connection, especially for post-COVID. So it is all right, I think, at this point in time to ask and urge companies to concentrate and develop the Singapore core. But if the conversation is carried too far without a balance, I think it might affect sentiments. And I think it becomes, it will affect our attractiveness for foreign investments. So it's something which we need to tread very, very carefully.
Right. Mr. From businesses with predominantly S-Pass workers to those with more PMETs on employment passes, which sectors will be able to adapt best and worst to these changes?
My general sense is that for those sectors which have a large number of foreign workers, as in the previous few days, we were told by MAS that the financial industry has a large share. So I think those sectors will be more affected because I think the numbers are just larger, and the change will be the change will have to be multiplied amongst many employers within that sector. So that's one. I think also that for those sectors, for example, in the services sector, whereby these EPs are employed in the broad middle, meaning that they are not here because they have special skills, but they are here because they are doing business development work, marketing, general administration. I think in these sectors, then it is easier for them to find replacements in PMET. So for these sectors, maybe in the retail sector, for example, it might be easier for them to switch to hire locals. Now, turning to some other sectors where by technology and keeping pace with the advance ahead of the curve technology, like manufacturing is important, research and R&D is important. I think in this case, it's much harder because these new skills are harder to combine locally. It takes time. So for this sector, I think Singapore companies there will continue to rely on expertise from overseas. So hard to generalize. It depends on the sectors and those factors which I've just mentioned.
Right. Well, something new that was announced today, MOM is setting higher qualifying salaries for the financial services sector, and only for that sector. Why was it singled out for this one?
When the EP was raised to about 4,500, it closely averaged the median salary, because I think the job support scheme was for companies up to 4,600. So there is a sense that for the rest of the sectors, 4,500 represents a sort of the median wage. But I think if you take a slice of the income of those working in the financial sector, I think it is probably true that the income is much higher in the financial sector. So I think their average median age in the wage in the financial sector would be higher. So I think it is logical. It is logical for the financial sector to have a higher qualifying eligibility wage. I think it's also a signal. I think it's also a signal to the financial sector that the current situation is not desirable, and it is also a signal to the financial sector that the government would want the financial sector to take in that responsibility to have a more diversified workforce and to change much faster.
Mr. Ho, just to round up our discussion for today, is there also a chance that raising the minimum wage of EP and S-Pass holders will result in higher business costs without really benefiting locals?
I think the chances are there. So let me say that it's not so straightforward, because the companies might want to hire a local. But in order for a local to agree to take on that job, expectations need to be met. Sometimes wage expectations need to be met, and there is still a gap. Second is that there is a skills and capability gap as well. So that gap needs to be matched as well. So these are not easy issues to deal with. I think you give sufficient time and say, for example, training infrastructure with the existing government grants and incentive for training, I think it will help. But if policy is, if the hike is too steep and companies do not have enough time to adjust, one is that you will find that companies will say, well, I can't find the locals, I just pay the higher cost to get the EP. That will be one outcome. The second, and probably a not so good outcome, is that, look, they will give up. I say, I really, this is too high a cost for me to operate in Singapore. I might as well take my businesses out. So we will lose not just the foreign workers' job, but we will lose the locals' job that's associated with that particular company. Now, we don't want that second scenario. So let's be very careful how we do this. I think the hike cannot be too steep, and I think you must give enough time for companies to adjust, because there is that gap in expectations, in skill level between the local workers and the job they want. We want them to fill for the foreign workers.
Well, Mr. Ho, thank you very much. It was a pleasure and indeed very valuable to have your take on this matter. We've been speaking to Mr. Ho Meng Kit, CEO of the Singapore Business Federation.
Singapore's future is looking greener and more sustainable thanks in part to the coronavirus pandemic. Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung said today in his ministry's addendum to the President's speech, the lower traffic and new travel patterns brought about by COVID-19 have opened a window of opportunity to reimagine our road infrastructure. Some ideas in the works include converting roads for pedestrian use and underused road lanes into cycling paths and bus lanes. It was previously announced that the cycling path network will be extended to 1,300 kilometers by 2030, that is 3 times the current length.
Meanwhile, Sustainability and Environment Minister Grace Fu today announced 4,000 new and upgraded jobs will be created in the next 12 months and 55,000 over the next 10 years. They include roles in high-tech agriculture and aquaculture, food safety and cleaning and waste management. MSE will also develop local talent by offering scholarships in areas like climate adaptation and climate sciences.
Now, one theme is apparent across the ministry's addenda today, that is developing Singapore in a sustainable way. So we're now joined by Environment Correspondent Audrey Tan. Audrey, from MND planning for more eco-friendly HDB towns and estates to MOT looking at improving travel patterns, we're looking at a more sustainable Singapore in the future, well, hopefully. Now, do you think the government's priorities have changed, if at all, to bring sustainability to the fore?
I think it's worth noting that sustainability has been mentioned in earlier government agendas before. So, for example, we've had Sustainable Singapore Blueprint, which sets out goals such as, having people's houses located near public transport nodes or having people's homes near parks. So the focus on sustainability itself, I wouldn't say is particularly new, but I do think that the pandemic has brought about certain gaps that have highlighted the need for people to be more sustainable than before. And while the pandemic could eventually, be eased with the development of a vaccine, there's also the other issue of climate change to worry about. And ever since PM Lee brought it up and nudged climate change on the national agenda last year in his National Day rally speech, we have been seeing more ministries, including sustainability, into their ministry's agenda, beyond just like the Ministry for Sustainability and the Environment.
Well, Audrey, you alluded to this earlier, but could you elaborate on this? In what ways has COVID-19 driven the importance of ramping up our sustainability efforts?
So I think one thing that came across in the multiple ministries' addenda today is that sustainability goes beyond just environmental protection. They also highlighted the importance of ensuring sustainable livelihoods, which is why Minister Ong Ye Kung talked about, re-kickstarting Singapore's aviation hub. So that's one issue, like, ensuring that Singaporeans constantly have jobs. Ms. Grace Fu also talked about the importance of having new jobs in the sustainability sector, even as Singapore pursues sustainable development. So that's one. And beyond that, with climate change, MND's plans to make Singapore a city in nature, to green the HDB towns, also talks about, ensuring that people's standard of living, quality of living would still be improved, even though, climate change might cause temperatures to go up higher and higher and so on. So I do think that the definition of sustainability has kind of like changed in a bit.
Now, Audrey, while the government and companies can strive to build a more sustainable Singapore moving forward, the onus is also on Singaporeans to play their part. Is there enough incentive for the everyday man to take up the cause? And if not, what more can be done?
Okay, so sustainability is quite broad, but I'm guessing that you're talking specifically on environmental sustainability in this aspect. So in Singapore, a lot of the onus has been on companies and corporations to be able to take up the role of being sustainable and all that. For example, in Singapore, we do not impose a surcharge on the use of single-use bags. Unlike other countries, like in the UK, where you have to actually pay to use bags, and the aim of that is to reduce the amount of waste that's used in the first place. But in Singapore, our approach to reducing waste is not really on the individual, but on companies. So recently, we had a new Resource Sustainability Act that was passed in Parliament, which aims to get storeholders or companies to be more concerned about the waste that they produce. Another thing that we are trying to do in Singapore is to reuse the incineration bottom ash as a way of prolonging the lifespan of our landfill. So I would say, no, we don't have a lot of incentives in Singapore to go green in certain aspects. But I do think that there is still a role for the individuals to play. I mean, in the climate circles, it's quite debatable about how much individual action can actually have an impact on climate change, on emissions. But I do think personally that it's important, not for the outcome in itself, but because it sends a signal. It sends a signal to the government that Singaporeans are ready to do more to push for climate change, and it also sends a signal to companies, that their consumers are more discerning about what they buy, and I think that could have quite a significant impact in the long run.
Well, great sharing there, Audrey. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. Always a pleasure to speak with you. We were speaking to Environment Correspondent Audrey Tan. Now, Audrey is writing a commentary on sustainability in the Correspondent's Take. Do look out for a piece coming out in the papers tomorrow and on straitstimes.com.
Here's an update on the COVID-19 situation in Singapore. 77 new cases were confirmed today. They include 2 community cases who are both Singaporeans.
There were also 5 imported cases who had been placed on stay-home notices upon their arrival here. More details will be released tonight.
In other Singapore news, the National University Heart Centre is hoping to recruit 100 COVID-19 patients to study why some patients suffer heart damage after they recover from the virus. One of the professors said COVID-19 should be viewed as impacting the entire vascular system, including the heart, lungs, kidneys, liver and brain, and not just a specific organ system.
2 teenagers who pleaded guilty to a drink sampling incident were each sentenced to 9 months probation. In July, 18-year-old Nigel Pang Meng drank out of 2 bottles of fruit juice at a fair price in Bukit Batok while his 17-year-old friend filmed him. The video was posted on Instagram with the caption, "How to spread Wuhan virus."
Good evening, I'm Dylan Ang. Let's take a look at the global headlines. We begin in New Zealand, where the High Court has sentenced Christchurch mosque shooter Brenton Tarrant to life in prison without parole, the first time such a sentence has been handed down in the country. The High Court judge said that a finite term would not be sufficient and that the crimes are so wicked that it will, quote, not exhaust the requirements of punishment and denunciation. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern welcomed the life sentence, saying that Tarrant deserved a lifetime of complete and utter silence. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has become the world's first ever person to be worth $200 billion as shares of the e-commerce giant climb to a record. The move simultaneously pushed his ex-wife Mackenzie Scott to the brink of becoming the world's richest woman, just behind L'Oreal heiress Françoise Bettencourt-Meyer. TikTok's CEO Kevin Mayer has left the company less than 3 months after joining, coming after sustained pressure from the Trump administration over its ties to China. In a note to employees seen by several media outlets, Mr. Mayer said that a series of changes to TikTok's structure prompted him to leave, but he didn't address the specific timing of his departure. Multiple sports leagues have suspended or postponed games as part of sporting boycotts to protest the Jacob Blake shooting in Wisconsin. The NBA postponed 3 playoff games scheduled for Wednesday after the Milwaukee Bucks boycotted Game 5 of their series against the Orlando Magic. The Bucks' decision sparked other franchises across various sports, from Major League Baseball to men's and women's tennis, to release statements stating that events will be put on hold. Japanese tennis player Naomi Osaka also withdrew from her Cincinnati Open semi-final match in protest. And those are the headlines around the world. It's back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Dylan. Before we go, Australia's famous Phillip Island Penguin Parade is now live streamed to the world for everyone to watch.
That's right. The event used to draw hundreds of visitors to the island, but due to the coronavirus lockdown, the nightly parade has moved online. Now, the little penguins are seen heading back to Phillip Island at sunset after spending the day fishing. Now, we have to admit to you guys that Haryanto and I were a bit excited, a bit giddy when we wanted this little story into the show.
It is. I'm gushing looking at all these cute little penguins.
I don't have a special affinity for penguins, but the way they walk, they remind me of my daughters when they first learn to walk, all the waddling, right? Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.